Ah yes, anime openings. The episode starts and you crank up that volume to immerse yourself in the sweet, sweet escapism only the finest of Japanese cartoons can offer. Each opening is a song of its own, but you might have noticed that there are certain things that sort of tie them together. I mean, you can listen to these songs on their own and they still scream, "Yep, this is weeb shit" at you. So what makes them sound like that? I have identified 3 major things that appear to have to do with that sort of sound. So let's dive in, shall we? Roll the intro. So the first thing has to do with genre. When trying to classify the most popular and well-recognized anime openings in terms of style, I found that the majority of them tend to fall under some combination or variation of these 4 genres. So let's go over some examples and definitions real quick. First up is post-hardcore. Some well-known openings that fall under this label are Unravel, aka the first Tokyo Ghoul opening. You know, the one that gives you emotional overload each time you hear it. Another example is the Parasite opening, Let Me Hear, with some more recent examples being the Demon Slayer opening, or the Vinland Saga and Banana Fish openings, both of which are made by the same band, by the way. They're great. So what is post-hardcore? Well, simply put, it's an aggressive and, well, hardcore form of punk music. But unlike its father, hardcore punk, it's a lot less limiting creatively, which means it can have a wide range of possible influences and musical elements. For example, Unravel is pretty post-hardcore but also has indie elements, and Let Me Hear incorporates electronic and metal/metalcore elements. These openings tend to sound really massive and heavy. They often have flashy guitar riffs, breakneck rhythms, and sometimes screamed vocals. Some Western equivalents of that type of music for comparison would be Silverstein, Dance Gavin Dance, and The Fall of Troy, for example. Next up is alternative and indie rock. Some examples you may know are Death Note and Berserk 97, with some more contemporary examples being Jujutsu Kaisen and Re:Zero Second Season. Alternative and indie rock are pretty broad umbrella terms, but essentially this means rock music that doesn't really fit within traditional rock or pop standards. This can mean different things, from harsher emotional tones to unconventional uses of effects to experimental genre-bending musicianship. For example, the Jujutsu Kaisen opening uses a bunch of cool guitar and vocal effects in combination with somewhat progressive mathy musicianship. While Berserk has the world's ugliest yet most beautiful guitar riff. Western counterparts to this type of thing would be Foo Fighters or 3 Days Grace, for example. Which brings us to punk and pop punk. Pretty much every shonen anime has at least 1 or 2 openings like this, especially Naruto, like seriously, half of all Naruto openings are basically Hot Topic punk music. Other examples would be like a bunch of Bleach openings, a couple of Hajime no Ippo ones, basically all the music in K-On!, and more recently the Dr. Stone and Haikyuu Season 4 openings. Punk music is basically a high-energy, fast-paced form of rock music, while pop-punk is its more melodic and mainstream palatable counterpart. Punk's musical philosophy is its simplicity and emphasis on passion, which works great in getting you pumped for some Japanese cartoons. These openings often sound rebellious, youthful, and just flat-out cool. Some similar sounding bands you may know would be Green Day, NoFX, Blink-182, early Paramore, you get the idea. And finally we're at J-pop and pop rock. I paired these because they often come together, but not necessarily or anything. You'll usually hear these openings in like cutesy shoujo anime, slice of life, dramas, romance, etc. For example, Love Live, Toradora, Oreimo, Your Lie in April, and all the disposable seasonal shows pretty much, you know, the ones with the very unrealistic portrayals of relationships. J-pop is just Japanese pop music, but it has its own tropes, for example synth-pop influences that are pretty common in the genre. And pop rock is just pop rock, also a pretty broad term that can be applied to most mainstream rock music. There aren't really any Western groups I can compare to J-pop, but there's plenty of pop rock out there that you probably know. From older groups like Fleetwood Mac and the Beach Boys, to Britpop groups like Oasis, all the way to whatever Fall Out Boy, Paramore and Panic at the Disco are doing these days. Now, this is something that you've probably heard of. It's pretty common knowledge by now. I'm of course talking about the 4 chords in every anime opening. This chord progression appears in tons and tons of anime songs, and it goes like this. Some examples of openings like this would be Overlord, Code Geass, Steins Gate, Gurren Lagann, Sword Art Online, and a ton of others. Like almost every anime has at least one opening or ending that utilizes this, if not more. So what's so special about it? I won't confuse you with a bunch of theory, as it would be counterproductive to the point of this video, but essentially, this progression just sounds somewhat exotic to the Western ear. You won't really hear this sort of thing often in contemporary proper rock, and the fact it appears in a ton of anime music, plus video game music and just Japanese music in general, makes it ring out Land of the Rising Sun in your ears. Another common composing trope in Japanese music would be lengthy and even jazzy chord progressions, whereas Western pop and rock often rely on fundamentals and chord loops. Japanese people just tend to have a higher flat standard when it comes to music as far as I've heard. Their composers often incorporate jazz and progressive musicianship in their works. It kinda reminds me of Russian pop music that also tends to do this, with their own tropes of course. So the final sort of reoccurring thing I noticed in many anime openings has to do with song structure. Most anime openings seem to be around a minute and a half or 90 seconds long. The songs used in them are just cut versions of the original, which almost always follow a relatively standard verse-chorus structure that's common in pop and rock, but with a couple minor quirks. The most standard anime song structure would be intro, then hook, then verse, then pre-chorus, then chorus, then bridge, and sometimes you'll also hear another short bridge here or there, usually after the hook or instead of the pre-chorus. Most openings seem to follow that, maybe with some minor variation. You start kinda slow with an intro that builds up to the hook, which sucks you in and is often a major upward spike in energy, and also commonly where the anime's title appears. Then it calms a bit for the verse, where you often see shots of the characters doing different things, giving you some insight. Then there's the pre-chorus, which usually carries a shift in tone and builds energy for the chorus, where everything comes together and it goes all out weeb mode again on you, with the bridge at the end summing it all up quickly after, leaving you thirsting for more. This song structure is pretty practical for the sake of anime openings, as you can see, which is probably the reason it's so common. So there you have it, the 3 major components that make up what we know as anime opening music. First comes the most popular genre choices, then some common composing tropes, followed by the effective song structure. You might argue that all anime openings sound too similar or whatever, but I really don't see it that way. These things are really just guidelines, and many animes shake up this approach or even break it entirely at times. A lot about all of this just works, so shows that go for really distinguished openings have to back it up with good ideas of their own, otherwise their openings just end up being ineffective and unremarkable, aside from novelty maybe. I was Eden from Not Aiming for the Truck. Thanks for watching, and have a good night folks. Peace.